You definitely shouldn't have.
Drum roll, please. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is the Ridge Runner Blades podcast, Table Full of Knives. I'm Taylor Grimes, Noah Green, and today's special guest is the one and only Josh Morgan, Primitive Woodsman. Thanks for coming down today, Josh.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
Great. So tell us about Josh. How'd you get started in the knife world, man?
How did I get started in the knife world? My first introduction to knives was when I was really, really little. I think I got my first knife when I was probably 5 years old, and I've carried one on me ever since. Spent a lot of time camping and doing stuff like that, just things that you need a knife for. And back in 2011, I moved up to Boone, North Carolina. I was going to go to school there for appropriate technology, and got into the mountains and had a lot more time to spend out in the woods and out and about, and ran into some cool cats that were making bows and arrows and knives and stuff like that, and started kind of meddling with it. Just making stuff on my front porch in my apartment, and then onto my, the porch of my rental house, just making handles, doing a lot of traditional bows, stuff like that. I mean, the first knife I ever ground or made, rather, I hand filed with a hand file on my breaks at my job on campus. And I was just doing it as a hobby for a long time because it was fun. It's really cool to make stuff and use the stuff that you make. And after I'd done that for a while, a friend of mine asked me if I'd ever considered selling any of it. She curated artisan markets around town in Boone, and I was like, I guess I'll give it a try. And I had a blast at the first market that I had done, and sold all the stuff that I had brought with me, and was like, all right, I guess this is a viable thing that I can do. So I just kind of continued from there to start building up the shop and my capabilities and all of that kind of stuff. That was kind of my introduction into making,
I wonder how many knife makers got started making knives on their porch.
Yeah, right. Probably a lot.
Probably more than we think. Yeah,
I would say probably quite a few.
Do have to ask you. Traditionally, what are you carrying with you today?
What am I carrying on me?
What are you carrying on you?
Right.
A little rundown.
Right now, I've been testing out, messing with some AEBL. So I've got this little fillet knife that I've been carrying around testing. It's just like a little pocketable travel fillet / kind of do it all game knife. So that's been my daily carry lately. And then, I've always got a couple other random things. Just my bunch of keys, key bar with all my
those are awesome
keys and stuff.
Love key bars.
Super handy. I love the copper on that one. Tiny little flashlight.
It is tiny.
Because you can't have too many flashlights or whatever. And then just a tiny little multi-tool. Right. It's a Squirt P4 that I've had for a really long time. I think I got for Father's Day like 6 years ago. And then what else? I always carry this light as well. Just a little O-light, S2 baton.
Very nice.
So,
cool.
Yeah, pretty handy. I end up using the light probably more than anything, honestly.
Yep.
So I'm sure you're all wondering why there's a truck in the background. This is a super cool little K truck. Tell us about your truck, Josh. I love this thing, man.
Yeah. So last year I was looking for a good little work truck, get around town truck, and it's been kind of heinous at the used car market. And I actually just drove by this one and was riding with my son. We jumped in it as a joke just to give it a test drive because we thought it would be fun. And we drove around town just grinning ear to ear for did a whole lap. And by the time we got back, I was like, I looked at it and I was like, I'm going to have to buy this, aren't I? Went home, grabbed the cash, came back, got the truck, and haven't regretted it. It's a pretty great little, it's the tiniest truck ever. But it's perfect for Boone where we live, 4-wheel drive. I'm never going too far, but gets me up and over the mountain pretty well.
Yeah. The old knife wagon.
Yeah, the old knife wagon.
That should be a sticker coming soon.
You can't miss me either. That's it's a good thing and maybe a bad thing sometimes.
So I want to ask you, I've asked you this before, but probably quite a few people are curious as saying, what is your favorite knife that you make? What do you have the most fun with? Production or?
Yeah, so I get asked a lot of different variations of that question. I always, so as far as my favorite knife to make is easily the Hellbender. I mean, it's the biggest knife that I make. It's just awesome when you pick up this knife. It makes you want to chop stuff.
Absolutely.
It's got a lot of characteristic that I think represents kind of what it is that I, have to offer to the knife world. And so I have a lot of fun with this. Grinding the fullers is super fun. There's just a lot going on in this knife that just brings me a lot of joy to make. And then it's like the other question I always get asked is, if you had to pick one knife that you were going to carry all of the time, what would it be? And then I switch it up and go for the Bushcrafter. Very nice. The Buffalo Cove. Just because it's a great do-it-all, lightweight knife that won't let you down. And I've had a lot of good feedback on just the overall usefulness and effectiveness of this knife. And that's been my experience as well. And so, that's really why I got into making tools in the first place, is to be an effective and useful item. And this one checks all those boxes for me.
We're big fans of that knife. Outside of North Carolina and Tennessee, I don't think everybody knows what a Hellbender is.
Yeah, okay. I can give some explanation of that. So the Hellbender, and you can see here on the handle, there's a little skeleton there. And that represents the Hellbender, which is the North America's largest salamander. And it's native to the areas that we live in up here in Western Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. And it's actually a really good indicator for the quality of water and just the health of the environment that's in the area. And I love spending time in the woods and on the water. And to me, I just kind of gravitated towards that creature. And it also has an awesome name, and it just kind of all fit together. A mature Hellbender is close to the same size as this knife. And it's a pretty special thing if you can catch one in the wild and, see one out there swimming around. So that's kind of what inspired the name. And also, the logo that I kind of have on, some of my boxes and end up on handles and other places. So
I think if you didn't know what a Hellbender was and you were in the water and you saw one, you probably have a heart attack.
Yeah. I mean, they got big. A lot of, and they got a lot of funny nicknames, snot otters and devil dogs and all kinds of things. But they're pretty great. They're really cool. They're hard to spot. If you find one, count yourself lucky.
I've never seen one in the wild yet, but me and Joe Flowers are going to hunt for one this summer sometime. Love to see one. I love reptiles and amphibians and all the herpetology stuff. So
yeah, same. I've got a bunch of buddies that are all fly fishing guides, or my buddy Andy, the Watauga River keeper. They'll send me pictures and videos. They're like, I found a Hellbender today.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Random question.
Yeah.
What's your least favorite part of the knife making process?
Least favorite part of the knife making process.
A lot of guys are going to say hand sanding.
Right.
There's a lot of guys.
Well, I would say hand sanding, 100% worst part of knife making ever. Also, my production methods don't require me to do that. So
dodged the bullet on that one.
Yeah. I've done that part, kind of intentionally, but I don't know if there's any least favorite part. I kind of have catered my process into what I like to do. Or I take all of the best aspects out of knife making that I enjoy, and that's why I make the types of knives that I make. Outside of that, probably stitching cheese.
Really?
Yeah, which I don't have to do as much of. My wife is kind enough to do most of that these days.
So
I do want to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about this? I think the viewers would love to know.
Yeah. So this is a little one-off brute to forge knife that I started working on back in the beginning of the year. I was just having a fun forge day with a couple guys in the shop, and pulled a bunch of scraps that were laying around, and which there are quite a few scraps in the shop that I'm in right now, sharing a shop with the guys at Baker Forge and Tool. There tends to be quite a bit of materials. And so we just kind of slapped them together. Me and two of my other buddies just each made a tiny little billet and stretched it out to see what we could get out of it. I mean, that billet probably started, this big. And everybody's knives turned out just a little bit different, but I had a lot of fun just kind of playing with some new shapes and stuff, and really trying to emphasize that shim and nickel that's in there.
It's very nice. Is this something that we can look forward to in a production model maybe down the road?
So I am working on doing a more brute to forge model, a line that will include some more forging. I don't know if they'll all have nickel shims in it like that, but definitely looking forward to doing more incorporating forging more into the process, into some aspects of the knives that I have to offer. Very
nice. It's a beautiful piece, man.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys, that one's spoken for.
He snatched it up.
I did. I couldn't resist, man. I love the forge texture stuff. All of the knives I have of yours are the brute to forge, and I'm just a sucker for that. Yeah. I love that, man. And this one is super cool.
I appreciate it. Yeah, the brute to forge stuff is really cool, and I mean that's really something that I gleaned off of spending time with Jason Knight, because he's kind of the master of the brute to forge blade, and yeah, I just kind of fell in love with that look, because it is, each one's unique. Even if I tried to make two exactly the same, the forging texture is going to be different and unique to that specific blade, and I just think that's cool.
How'd you end up working with Jason on a lot of stuff?
So I actually met Jason while I was working at Winkler Knives. When he first came in to start doing some collab stuff with them, and we kind of just hit it off immediately, hanging out and running around shooting guns and having a good old time, and we just have stayed friends over the years, and worked on a couple different projects and whatnot. And he's not too far away, just a little hop and skip over in East Tennessee, so I get to go hang out with them and do some forging and whatnot from time to time.
That's cool.
Work on a few little production batches that he's got going on, some of those little bird and trouts and things like that, and that's been really cool. Jason's been a super encouraging person just in the industry of knife making. I feel lucky to have been able to cross paths with him, but the first knife I ever ground with a fuller in it was when I was working at Winkler, and it was one that he had designed, and he just leans over and he goes, "Wow, hey man, it'd be real cool if you put a fuller in that." And I was like, "I guess you're the boss, so I'm gonna go ahead and try it." And then now I try and put a fuller in everything I can. But yeah, I don't think I'd quite be where I am now with it without some of his influences, as well as Daniel Winkler's influence as well. So
that's awesome, man.
Can we backtrack for just a second? I wanted to, for the viewers, when you say brute to forge, not everybody might know what that means. Can we touch on that a
Sure.
little bit?
Yeah. If you just take a look at this guy here, I mean, brute to forge just means that you leave forging texture on the blade. To some, I mean, it could be literally just the tiniest bit up here, and you could call that technically brute to forge, I believe. But for me, I like to just leave as much of the texture as possible, the most minimal amount of grinding, and that's really what that brute to forge term is referring to, just the forge texture that's left in the blade, as opposed to forging your shape and then grinding everything clean. Yeah, like this one.
I don't think we see enough forge scale on knives anymore. No. People that forge knives, like you said, they grind it all off in the end.
A lot of the time, that seems to be the case. And the thing that's always kind of cool about the knife world is it's a revolving door, just like anything else. Fads come and go, and you'll see a year where everything is this type of knife, and then the next year it's completely different. And so, it comes and goes. But I think that this will always kind of be a cool thing.
Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan. I love brute to forge and forged finish. Anything with that rustic, rustic old school look.
Right, and that's right up my alley. I mean, being the primitive woodsman, I'm kind of all about the kind of old world inspirations. Sometimes people give me a hard time. They're like, you're a primitive woodsman, but you have a laser in your workshop.
It's not very primitive.
It's about
is
the
it?
mentality to me, and what inspires me are things that are primitive, because primitive peoples relied on these tools for their very survival. And when you can look back at those peoples and the types of knives that they used and how they applied them, you can really apply that to the modern era now to make really effective tools. And so that's really where that comes from.
That's awesome. So I know you're pretty big into the bushcraft world and camping and stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we love the outdoors like that.
Absolutely.
How did you come up with the Fireside?
Oh, so the Fireside knife, this is this guy right here. It's just a tiny it's a petty chef, really. But you spend enough time in the backwoods and you want to cook something up. Sometimes your big chopper isn't what you want to cut up an onion with or whatever. So when you're on, backpacking around, it's kind of nice to have a little petite chef knife to slice and dice Fireside. When you're camping, I take a Fireside with me backpacking pretty much all the time now. But also, even if you're just like traveling about, it's nice to have a good knife that you can rely on that's sharp, instead of squashing your tomatoes on your tomato sandwich. When you're staying at that Airbnb, you can get some good slices out of it. So that's really where this came from. And I've definitely dabbled more and more into the culinary world lately, just because that's where the majority of people are using knives nowadays.
I agree, absolutely.
And for me, I like making knives that get used. So why wouldn't I make, kitchen knives, things that people are going to use every single day? And so that's really what drove me to kind of design this knife in particular. And unlike a lot of chef knives you see, this one actually has a sheath. So you can throw that in your pocket even, and now you're ready to slice and dice wherever you go.
Man, it shocked me when I found out how many knife guys that I know have Walmart kitchen knives in their kitchen.
Yeah.
The knives you use more than anything we spend the least amount of money on. Yeah. I'm guilty.
Yeah.
I just recently started getting custom kitchen knives and high quality stuff, man, because I got sick and tired of the Walmart special.
Oh yeah.
Not staying sharp.
One of those people is like, yeah, just give me whatever knife is in the drawer and it'll be fine. Until I started making chef knives and I was like, oh, all right, we're throwing all those away.
Yeah. So if you don't have custom kitchen knives, or at least high quality, check one out. It'll change your life.
It really will.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back to the Baker Forge thing. How'd you end up hanging out with those guys?
So we live in the same area, and I'd been making knives for quite a while at this point, and I'd known Coy Baker of Baker Forge and Tool for a while through mutual friends. He worked at a gun shop that was in town for a little bit, did Cerakote, some other things, so I was aware of who he was. And we just kind of started chatting after he had started getting into making Damascus and, all these different layouts of steel, and he had been dabbling with knife making. And I can't remember when exactly we reached out to each other, but he came by. He would stop by the house. He was running a painting company full time when I met him, a family painting company, and he'd stop by the house in between some clients he had to go see, and we'd talk about steel and knives and whatever for sometimes it'd go on for a couple hours, and he'd bring me some billets to test out, some early Sanmai and stuff like that. That was really cool. And we both kind of were getting to the point where he was getting a little more serious about it, and needed some more space. I needed some more space. So we just kind of met together and found a big shop space out in Zionville, North Carolina. And we've been there for the last couple years. And it's been awesome. I mean, both of our businesses have grown a ton. Is like insanely exponentially. It's like you see Baker Forge and Tool Steel literally everywhere. Everybody's seen it or heard of it or used it, or and that's been super cool. There's been a lot of fun opportunities because of that, meeting folks like the Microtech guys, or Heretic guys, or all
and
these
a
other
ton
big,
of custom makers
big
too.
companies that are using his stuff, and then all these other handmade guys. We've had a little hammer in last year after Blade Show, and just all kinds of different guys from all over the place coming and hanging out and sharing stories and techniques, and it's been a lot of fun. Yep, we're still there hanging out in Zionville. I don't know how much longer those guys are blowing up. They're probably about to move into a lot bigger space out there, but we'll see where that goes.
If you guys don't know about Baker Forge, they make some of the coolest Damascus, incorporating like brass, bronze, nickel, silver, copper, stuff you don't see all the time.
Really unusual
awesome
stuff.
Cool stuff.
Really nobody else in the industry is even attempting, really. So it's pretty cool.
I'd like to ask, outside of your own personal brand, what other brands do you support and go after when you look at it?
When I'm looking for knives?
Absolutely.
Well, for the longest time, I always liked, before I transitioned completely into just carrying fixed blades all the time, and now it's, most of the time I'm like in the process of testing a new model or something. I'm carrying a lot of my own stuff these days, but I used to carry Spydercos all the time, mostly the wave opener. Spydercos, just because they're great. They're handy and they're super light, and you don't feel bad if you break one or you lose one. I'm trying to think. I've always carried Leatherman stuff, multi-tools all the time. It's like, even now, if I go into the backcountry, I'm going to have a Leatherman on me because it's got all the tools that you need. I always end up needing it for something. Those are probably the two biggest companies that I really carry stuff anymore. But there's a handful of makers that I like. I like the Josh Fisher. He's a master smith, but he's got a line of stuff kind of similar to what I've been doing. I picked one of his knives up at the Blade Show, Texas. And I've actually just in the last year or so started really trying to go after and build my collection again of buying knives from other makers and stuff like that, and not just like, oh, I want a knife that does this, I'll just make it. Because it's good to support the community and other people doing the stuff, and it's always cool and interesting to me to see how other people are putting their stuff together and what kind of finishes they're doing and how it balances, how it carries. And when you support other people doing what you're doing, it helps you progress as well. And I think that that's something that's kind of unique about even the knife industry in general, as there's a lot of sharing. And even though we're like, a lot of makers are technically in competition with each other, there's a lot of freedom of sharing information and encouraging each other to do better in this way or that way, or sharing techniques and things like that really doesn't happen in most other industries. And so I'm really appreciative for that, and I'm always trying to figure out better ways to be a part of that.
The community,
right.
Knife making and knife collecting is a community. It's more about community than anything. I feel like most knife makers are willing to share just about any knowledge they have, I think.
Yeah. And the fact of the matter is, like, people have been making knives for thousands of years, and there's really nothing new under the sun. So there's no point in trying to gatekeep it or hide it, or
shouldn't be any secret.
No, right. There's nothing I'm doing that's a secret. There's been plenty of people doing exactly what I'm doing long before I ever even contemplated doing it. So
outside of like Jason Knight and Winkler, is there anybody else who inspired you as a knife maker?
Really, it was just the people that I was hanging out with when I first started getting into it. We just were spending all of our time in the woods that we could, and running around and cutting down trees and shooting guns and building bows and arrows. And it was just cool and so gratifying to make something with your hands that was useful. And when you spend time around people that make stuff, it makes you want to make stuff. And even though some of those guys weren't even knife makers, even at the time, I think most of them are now.
It's gonna graduate towards it.
But it's just really cool. And I mean, by the time I think that was really it. I mean, I've been just as inspired by painters and potters and, you know, people making tapestries and stuff as I have been by other people making knives.
That's a cool way to think about it. I never looked at it that way before.
It's all art, you know.
It is art, yeah. I think people don't see knives as art that often anymore, and it's anything you create is pretty much art.
Yeah,
right.
So. That's true.
It goes back to you saying like earlier, like there's no, when it comes to the brute to forge or the hand forged pieces, you'll never have a duplicate of that.
Right.
You know, that's why it's so, you know, it's like that Carolina Reaper. You'll never have another one like that one, man.
Yeah. Well, so the Reaper that he's talking about, I do have a knife I've designed. It's called the Carolina Reaper. It's got a hawk's bill kind of shape to it. And it'd been a design I'd mulled around with for a while. And back to the Baker Forge stuff is some of the opportunities I've had when they were coming up with a new layout. It's all right, we need a test knife. And so there was a particular billet that came across. It was the first time they had we had succeeded at the integral billet, because we tried at it for like a year and a half to get the process down for an integral billet. And they knocked it out of the park, and we're like, all right, well, now we need a test knife. And it was the perfect piece to do this Carolina Reaper out of. And I kind of wish that I would have brought it with me today so you could see it on camera right now. But it's got this beautiful copper Mascus integral bolster with a twisted W's core, and it just came out awesome. Wicked. And, you know, there probably never will be another knife that is that. And it's a special piece, and it's really cool, and it's going to sit on my desk until somebody offers me an ungodly sum of money for it, I guess. But yeah, it is fun. That's the part of it that is art, you know, or where you can, it's more than just making a tool.
Absolutely.
And that is a cool aspect of it. It gives you a lot of freedom. It gives me a lot of freedom of expression in design and shape and, you know, choice of materials and all that kind of stuff that plays into it. Even though the core of it still is a tool, all those variables are at play.
Very nice.
Anything cool coming up for you?
Yeah.
Anything new?
Well, the biggest thing that's been on my mind lately has just been the forged stuff. So I think I've got it in my head exactly how I'm going to pull it off. And still working on. I got a few tooling things that I got to get in the shop before then, but that's kind of on the horizon as far as new things that I'm going to be coming out with. That's where I'm at. I've been having a lot of fun. My buddy Kyle, who's been working with me part-time just the last handful of months, has been coming up with some of his own designs, and I'm helping him get stuff water jet cut and, you know, really get the process dialed in for his stuff. And that's honestly been super fun and cool to be able to just like take all the stuff that I've figured out in my years of doing this and help my buddy get his feet under him. So that's been a fun thing. He's in my shop all the time, so there's going to be a bunch more of that kind of stuff going on. And then outside of that, I mean, in the knife world, not a whole lot. I'm going on a fishing trip at the end of the month that I'm really looking forward to.
What knife are you taking out there with you?
So I've got another version of this in ABL, but it's like this long.
Dang.
So I'm gonna finish that up and see if I can't catch a fish worthy of it. But we'll see how that goes.
Where are you going?
We're going down to Punta Gorda, Florida. It's on the Charlotte Harbor on the Gulf Coast. So I'm just going to be ripping a jet ski around and chasing down monster fish.
That sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, it should be a good time.
Well, I guess that's it for this episode with Josh Morgan. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Follow Josh on Instagram, Primitive Woodsman.
Yep.
Check out Ridge Runner Blades. We'll have all these knives on the table on there, and I'm sure this will not be our last order. So just be looking on there for new products, and yeah, Josh, thank you so much for coming out,
Cool.
man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Good to see you, bro.
Yeah, good to see you.
All right, that's it.
Thank y'all.